What was your final you to a boss you didn't like? Story 1. My coworker bought cake and ice cream for the office. Someone asked what we were celebrating, and he said his last day. Story 2. I was thinking about quitting but was holding back. I scheduled a vacation with 3 extra days. It was a once-in-a-lifetime type of trip. He rejected my vacation request. I thought about it for a couple of hours, went to his office and told him, I'm taking the trip no matter what. The next morning the boss met me at hour and gave me a formal written warning. I responded by giving him my 2-week notice. They apologized and tried to convince me not to leave, but it was too late. Story 3. On my last day at the bowling alley, I sent an email to head office detailing all the shit he'd been up to, but everyone was too afraid to report. Inc. Trying to fire someone when he found out she was pregnant. A big no-no in my country. I heard later that the next day regional manager and a couple of executives turned up for a surprise inspection. He's found in the office, having backed a 16-year-old female colleague in the corner, screaming at the top of his lungs, with his big red vein throbbing face touching hers. She was distraught and obviously crying her eyes out. Manager was escorted off premises there and then and never heard from again. Story 4. I worked at a dry cleaner for a summer. Front desk, cash under table type of job. I worked 50 hours one week and he told me he'd pay me time and a half for the OT. I go into work on payday and my cash envelope is not in the drawer. I called him and asked about it and he told me he couldn't pay me for my work yet. I kindly informed him that I was taking the money I was owed, and locking up the shop, and left. Story 5. My boss and I had butted heads a few times after she took over the office. After finding a much better job I handed her a list of my job responsibilities, which she asked for because she didn't understand what I did there. This is too much, we'd have to distribute all this to like 4 different people, and I said, yay, and walked out. Spoiler, she didn't do any of that and was fired less than a year later as the office was falling apart. Story 6. I gave him a 2-hour notice when I quit. He had a habit of firing people on the spot when they gave advance notice. Story 7. Working retail, I quit at the register on Black Friday. I had recently gotten another full-time job and was keeping this retail gig because I liked the employee discount, and due to my other job this check was pure fun money. All that is to say I didn't need the retail job. My store manager comes over at hour 7 of my shift, with chaos and a line 100 people long, and has the nerve to tell me my upsells, fishing for promo sign-ups, i.e. rewards, credit cards etc., weren't cutting it for how much traffic I was seeing. In front of the customers. I already couldn't stand this so I said, you know what, you do it, I'm done, and then I apologized to my co-workers on the way out. Story 8. As far as my life goes, it was the shittiest job I ever took. Long hours, a lot of crunch, no company vehicle and a lot of travel. Every time I'd go to a different site I would get like 20 different phone numbers for the various people I was communicating with. Anyway, so all of the contacts for these people was on my company phone that was synced up to my personal Gmail, which stored all the phone numbers. At some point management decided my job was redundant and decided to lay me off without notice and without severance. First thing I did was wipe my company phone clean before handing it over. A few days later they called me asking where all the contact information was stored. Sorry, I don't work for you anymore. Story 9. Mechanic at a commuter airline. Boss wanted me to sign off a plane pre-flight inspection. I refused to sign because the plane was not airworthy. He told me if I wished to continue working, then it'd better sign. My response: then I guess I don't work here anymore. I picked up my toolbox and left. Edit: yes, I am an A&P. I did report it to the head of maintenance as well as the FAA. No, I cannot reveal the airline, but rest assured, they have been absorbed by other major airlines several times and are not flying these model of planes any longer. Story 10. My boss's boss hated me. He drove out my previous boss that was one of the best managers I ever worked for. He demoted me, and then when the company laid off everyone else who knew my product, I insisted he restore me to my previous status or I quit. He did, and he wasn't happy about it. Eventually he demoted me again and I found another job. During my exit interview with HR, I spoke at length about how he'd fucked up the department and fired many excellent people who were now working for the competition. A few months later he was escorted to the door and told never to return. Apparently the company took a good, long look at him and found he'd been holding his meetings with his subordinate managers in a local bar and would sometimes never return to the office. I don't know whether my discussions with HR had anything to do with their review of his performance, but I'd like to think so. Story 11. The manager told me the company I worked for owned me and that I'd do what they said or face consequences. This was in a meeting with other employees present. I walked out of the store with the manager screaming at me to get back to work. Story 12. This was my senior year of high school. I worked at IHOP and my direct supervisor was leaving, so the GM was going to take over my schedule. Well, he didn't like me or my 2 friends who worked there as well. So when he posted the new schedule and drastically cut our hours, all 3 of us walked out and quit. He still had to fill like 4 or 5 weekday shifts and cover all of our weekend hours because all of us worked both Sat and Sun morning rush. Story 13. Salary was delayed by 2 weeks and was about told to be lenient because the company is growing and needs our help and cooperation. I waited for another week but I was ignored. I left the job without notice and upon them calling me to sue me, I replied, you have money to sue people but no money to pay employees. I switched job and I am at a better place right now. Story 14, worked in China in a language training center. Left the country without informing anyone at work. Once I was out of China, I posted all the info I had about the benefits foreign workers were supposed to have but never had, tax reimbursement, pension savings, etc., and how HR and finance appropriated them in regional and local WeChat groups both in English and Chinese. Also posted addresses of local government offices where foreign workers could inquire about the aforementioned benefits or complain about lack thereof. Story 15, I interviewed for a new job and was offered it. I wrote my 2-week notice that same day and handed it over the next morning. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The complete waste of oxygen that was the GM at the time tried to compete with the new job, and I laughed in his face. Told him that in order for me to even consider staying, he would have to give me a $9 per hour raise, PTO, and health insurance. He made a hateful comment, and I took my notice and changed the final date to the current date and told him to have fun working 7 nights a week. The new job was a lateral move, same exact job, same hours, just a better company, and is still my current job. I've had 12 raises, just celebrated 10 years there with management having food delivered for me every night for a week. Story 16, applied for a full-time job at a daycare. Interview was on Friday and the director said she would text me over the weekend to tell me my hours for next week. Yay, I got the job. Monday rolls around and no text or email from her, so I am sitting in my PJs at home thinking I'm out of work. At 10 a.m. a random number calls me and she asks me to come in for 11. I let it slide thinking she lost track of time or whatever. By the end of the day I asked for my schedule and she said she'll contact me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The next day is the same thing, except this time she calls at 11 a.m. asking to come in for 11:15. I waited 2 hours for her call. Now I have no car and live 15 minutes away. On top of this the shifts were only 4-ish hours long, so the job isn't even full-time. I tell her I need a schedule by the end of the day. Didn't get one. The next day she calls at a random time but too late, I'm busy at an interview with a different job. I tell her I'll stop in to get my check by the end of the week because she can't respect my time and lied on the ad about being full-time. Also I am not getting paid to be on call. Story 17, I walked into his office before my shift started, told him, I quit. He says, you're giving your 2 weeks notice. I said, looking at my watch, I'm giving my 10 minutes notice. Story 18, was in line for a promotion after my old supervisor was fired for ethics issues. Boss decided to open the requisition, interview and hire a person all in the 2 days I had off. Since the person hired had no experience in my department, field, I was expected to train my new supervisor, and the other new people they also hired. I did none of that, quit, gave my 2 weeks, and didn't explain a single thing to anyone in those 10 days. Supposedly it took almost half a year to get close to where they were before this all went down. Story 19, I was a program director developing and piloting a new program, and after a year of being overloaded and telling our exec director I either needed a second person or a smaller caseload, he pulls me into his office and goes, we don't really think you're a good fit for this position, but you're a bright young lady and we'd hate to lose you. I'm giving you the option to stay and be my secretary. You have until 7 a.m. tomorrow to decide. I took an early lunch, walked to my other job, asked if I could take on more hours, walked back, and told him I had found other employment and would have my stuff cleared out by noon. He asked if I could stay 2 more weeks to train a new person, and I told him no. What if we paid you a consultation fee? No, but you're the only person in the county certified. Should have thought of that earlier. Bonus, this was in the middle of an audit, where it was discovered that he owed me about $3,000 from unpaid hours. I like to call it my leaving bonus. Story 20, I bought the .com version of the domain name for their business and made him buy it off me for $1,000. I think it made him like me more, ironically. Story 21, I reported him to the work inspection. He was employing more trainee than the legislation allows for a company this size and was making them work them like full paid workers, with basically no formation at all. He got controlled and fined a big amount of money, had to give money to previous trainee that had worked for him, etc. His company closed for bankruptcy after that. Sweet justice. Story 22, I said, fuck this, and hung up on him after him yelling at me over the phone and saying demeaning crap. I didn't return to work. He sees me around sometimes and initially tried to pretend like nothing happened, but quickly realized that I pretend he doesn't exist. Story 23, my boss called me in on a Thursday and told me they were going to have to let me go. She offered to have me work Friday and Saturday and I told her no. She came back with, well it's really busy and we need the help. I told her that was her problem and she should have let me go Saturday. Her response was, I'm not scheduled to be in on Saturdays. Fuck you Cindy. She had to come in Saturday and was an anchor to the team. She got fired a few weeks later. Same job, the owner of the place got on me about cleaning up the mess some other people made. I told him no and to make them clean it up. He responded with, well what if I fire you right now if you don't do it? I told him to go ahead, if I'm fired they have to clean up their mess anyways. He didn't fire me and I stood there and watched all the people clean up their mess. Story 24, I'm a commercial construction superintendent. I couldn't get the support needed from our PMs and had been thrown under the bus for several deficiencies that I had pointed out early in the project, all of which were ignored. My 30 years of experience meant nothing against their 3 to 5 years in the industry. I was tasked with developing a safety program that was never enforced or followed, as well. 3 sites were nailed by OSHA. I got the blame for that as well. One evening, on a whim, I restored my laptop, tablet, and phone to factory settings. The next morning I removed all of my belongings from the site trailer. I then locked it up, sent him a "goodbye and fuck you very much" message, and tossed the keys into a retention pond. I got a call 4 hours later from the company I now work for, and 8 days later I had moved to a new state for twice the salary and a lot less stress. Story 25. My boss had been completely ignoring me because he perceived my actions of talking about an upcoming project with the COO, his boss, as me, going over his head. It had been almost a month and he hadn't agreed to meet or talk with me, he would only send me tasks via email. I was tired of the childishness, so I found another job. With my resignation letter in hand I walked to his office to resign, and he predictably refused to meet with me, claiming to be too busy, so I continued to walk to the COO's office to let him know I was resigning. The COO asked if my boss knew which was the perfect time to let him know about the silent treatment I had been receiving. My old boss no longer works there. Smiley face. Story 26. Had a boss that was terrible to me. Him and his wife owned a restaurant together, and one day when he was yelling at me while I was getting the bar ready, I saw him putting his password on his phone. It was space. We all know something was going on with him with another employee. Months later he wouldn't give me 3 days off because my niece died of SIDS. So I walked out, bought a $30 burner phone and texted his wife his password. They got divorced, she kept the steakhouse, and he's had 2 failed attempts at opening any establishment. I make more than him now and he lives in the crappy apartments down the road from me.